Good morning. I didn't want to do another video this quickly, but I've been left with no choice. Two things I want to address. Number one, I keep being referenced to the fact that sure, this one doctor, this Stella Manual doctor, is kind of a kooky quack, but there's all these other doctors who are basically saying the same thing, and they don't seem to be kooky quacks. They're part of this America's Frontline Doctors group, and wow, America's Frontline Doctors. We should be listening to them. They're America's Frontline Doctors. No, they're not. They're an AstroTurf group. They're the equivalent of the Academy of Tobacco Studies, which we all know was an arm of conglomerated tobacco. This is a group. This is a right-wing operative group with no transparency about anything. Their funding, who's really making them up. Most of them are not really subject matter experts. You know, you see, for example, Stella Manuel. Other than the fact that she believes in some, weird third world stuff, she's a pediatrician going out there talking about how her 90-year-old patients have been doing well. That's one indication. This is a crap group, and I don't want to hear anything about them. So we can put that aside. Now, the other thing is I keep being referenced to this Detroit study, this Henry Ford Health System study that showed that death was pretty significantly reduced in people who got hydroxychloroquine compared to those who didn't in the hospital. And it's like, what the heck, Eric? We know some of us don't trust CNN, some of us don't trust Fox News, some of us don't trust MSDNC. We trust you, Eric, and you've been talking about this fact that it hasn't been proven, and you're referencing all these studies that show it doesn't work, but this seems like a pretty legit study. What's going on? Here's the deal. If anybody's watched the videos I was doing earlier, I've been clear that there have been some studies that have shown some positive effect size that was statistically significant in hydroxychloroquine, and that if those didn't exist, we wouldn't be talking about this, right? The point is, those findings have not been replicated in other studies, and a study that is done retrospectively and observationally is meant to be what we call hypothesis generating, meaning you find something positive in that study, you then go try to apply it to a higher quality design study and see if it is replicated. And in the case of hydroxychloroquine, that has not been replicated when you've done either prospective trials or prospective observational studies, or interventional trials where you actually do drug versus placebo. We've not found a difference. So let's look at the study design. Retrospectively looked at patients in the hospital who got hydroxychloroquine versus those who didn't, and people who got it had less death than people who didn't. Notice I'm not saying compared to placebo, because this is not an interventional trial. You are retrospectively going back and looking at something that happened observationally. What can happen with those kinds of studies? Well, there are confounders and there's bias. There's the placebo effect that you're not countering with placebo medication. There's the fact that people who come in baseline much sicker are less likely to be put on hydroxychloroquine. So you systematically are looking at a generally less sick group compared to a more sick group. And that could be a confounding variable that accounts for less death. But we don't really know. It's still a pretty good effect size. So then you do the prospective studies, then you do the randomized control trials. What have we found in those studies? No benefit. So yeah, I will fully acknowledge that Henry Ford study, a decent, solid, retrospective observational cohort study that showed a reduction in mortality in people who took hydroxychloroquine or who were given it versus people who were not given it. And that deserves to be published in a peer-reviewed International Journal of Infectious Diseases. But you have to understand how to appraise research if you're going to go on and make assertions. And people who didn't go through this kind of training don't have that ability. I don't want to be condescending, but you just don't. Just like I wouldn't try to figure out what's wrong with my car. I'd take it to a mechanic. Okay? So the bottom line is that whether or not there is a group of patients that we have yet to identify who, if given this medication at the right time, such as early or preventative, may derive some benefit from hydroxychloroquine, we don't really know. We're in a state of what we call equipoise. It could go either way. Right now it's leaning toward it probably doesn't do much, and we know it has side effects. In the hospital, you either get it and have coronavirus, so either don't get it and you have coronavirus symptoms and we treat you supportably, or you get it and you have coronavirus symptoms plus the shits because you took hydroxychloroquine. That's about the only difference I noticed. And in my appraisal of the research that's out there, unfortunately, hasn't been shown to do much. The other thing I take significant significant offense to is when I hear people talk about how, well, first of all, I don't understand the logic of when you say that this drug doesn't work, you're somehow working for Big Pharma. Wait a minute. You're a shill for Big Pharma, so you don't want to give people a medication? Take me through that logic. I don't quite understand that one. Or like, you're not going to wear a mask, but if so what if I get the disease? I'll just take hydroxychloroquine. That's like, I'm not going to wear a condom because I can just take antiretroviral therapy if I get HIV. It's like ridiculous logic, and just wear the mask and shut up. But I take exception to the idea that, like, if you're on the left and you don't like Trump, that you're biased and you don't want this stuff to work. Medical bias goes in the opposite direction. We want things to work. That's why we have to do careful analysis and account for that bias. You honestly think that during the first month and a half, when we were giving our hospitalized patients hydroxychloroquine, and I'm going and seeing all these COVID patients I'm taking care of and listening to them gasp and hack and cough, that I'm walking around thinking, I hope this doesn't work? Are you fucking kidding me? Of course that's not the case. I want it to work. We have to account for that bias. That's why we do careful assessment of data. Okay? So I really hope that puts this into perspective a little bit. There is ongoing research being done right now to see if there is a preventative benefit of taking it in healthcare workers. We don't know yet. But as of the C word, cure, it's not. It is not a cure. It does not fit the definition of cure. May it be a possible remedy, meaning it works some of the time in some cases, in some potential small effect, if given in the right situation. Doesn't seem so, but maybe. It's not a cure. And some studies show one thing, some studies show another. When something really works, those studies are replicated in additional studies, and when better, higher quality designs are done, it is shown in those. And in this case, that has not been the case. All right. So hope this was helpful, and hopefully I won't have to make another one of these for a little bit. Good day.